Thank you for watching. My name is Matthew Hauser, and my project is titled The Politics of Logistics. The United States faces a new threat environment in the Indo-Pacific. Beijing's investments in anti-access, area denial technologies, mainly long-range precise missiles, threaten U.S. supply lines. Currently, U.S. military logistics rely on a centralized network of large, slow, and specialized aircraft and vessels that will be vulnerable targets and difficult to replace. China's anti-ship missiles could destroy U.S. supply networks and cut off forward forces in the region, and we do not currently have an active defense to this threat. But diffusion is a viable option for countering this threat. Under diffusion, supply lines would be distributed across more geographic space and made up of more cheap, small, and nimble transportation platforms to make it harder for China to disrupt or strike our supply lines. This would give U.S. military logistics the needed resilience to maintain its forward presence in the Indo-Pacific. The defense community is already addressing this threat tactically. The political story of logistics, however, is under-discussed. A diffusion strategy provides a ripe opportunity for Washington to build and strengthen relationships in the Indo-Pacific and complicate Chinese decision-making. First, I look at the dilemma for China, and then I will examine the economic, military, and political incentives for regional partners to join a diffuse integrated logistics network. The United States adopting diffuse integrated military logistics will present a dilemma for China, who has two options in a conflict. First, China can choose to strike U.S. supply lines embedded in third-party nations, or it can avoid striking third-party territory. If China takes the first option and aggressively attacks U.S. supply lines, it will need to attack third-party nation territory, drawing the host nation into the conflict. This is known as horizontal escalation and would expand the war for China. If China does not want to escalate, it can take the second option and decline to strike. But then China will have essentially let these third-party nations become safe havens for U.S. resupply, where the United States can run logistics untouched in partner territory. Either way, Beijing faces two bad options, and the costs will increase for China in a conflict. This escalation puzzle will complicate Chinese decision-making. Integrated diffused logistics will improve the United States' standing in the Indo-Pacific. Washington can gauge the commitment of regional nations through logistics support with a system that entices fence-sitters in the region to work with the United States. Cooperation will lead to improved relations with partners. Integration with local nations is a requirement for the United States to successfully disperse its logistics and create the escalation puzzle. Washington can offer economic, military, and political incentives to make cooperation the best option for host nations. The United States has many economic options available to encourage cooperation, from trade agreements to direct aid. I highlight two. First, the United States could invest in a cooperating nation's infrastructure through development aid. Second, investments in dual use, which are civilian and military projects, can benefit the local economy while also increasing the ability of the host nation to support U.S. resupply operations. Policymakers can encourage these projects through direct foreign investment, which draws together economies and serves as a win-win. Enhanced capabilities of host nations support a greater forward posture for the United States and increase the cost of horizontal escalation for China. Logistics integration agreements can provide military benefits for host nations in two ways. First, the U.S. and host nation will need to share operational information to successfully coordinate many moving parts. By working with the U.S., host nations will get better information about threats near their borders. Second, integration can signal U.S. security commitment to threatened countries. Diffused military logistics signal Washington's investment in the region's security by addressing a key strategic threat in cooperation with regional partners. Cooperation with the United States on integrated logistics appeals to domestic political audiences who desire a hard line on China. In Australia, for example, the major parties, both left and right, are competing to be the toughest on China. The United States can address this growing frustration towards China by offering integrated diffuse logistics as a means for leaders to demonstrate their hawkish stance. Cooperating with Washington can serve as a signal of strength towards China. Logistics integration provides a non-aggressive military agreement that can signal displeasure towards China and slight support of the U.S. at an acceptable cost and risk for host nations. By aligning U.S. and partner interests, American policymakers can ensure that integration agreements have the needed credibility and resiliency for success. With dispersed military logistics, the United States can preempt the military threat and carefully construct agreements for maximum benefit. Integrated diffuse logistics in the Indo-Pacific will allow the United States to turn a current vulnerability into an opportunity. Thank you.